She doesn't need to raise her voice to control you. She doesn't need to argue, threaten, or beg. All she needs is silence. You think control only happens when someone tells you what to do. But in reality, the most powerful kind of control comes from what's not said, from the pause in her replies, from the sudden coldness in her tone, from the look that tells you, without a single word, that something's wrong, and now it's your job to fix it. Welcome to the dark side of modern dating, where power isn't taken, it's given away. You see, in today's world, most men don't even realize they're being emotionally conditioned. They mistake emotional pressure for connection. They confuse silence for mystery, distance for desire, and manipulation for love. They think she's just hard to get, when in reality, she's learned exactly how to keep you chasing your own validation. Every time she pulls back, you panic. Every time she ignores your message, you double text. Every time she gets quiet, you start asking what you did wrong. And that's when she wins. Because now you're no longer acting from confidence. You're reacting from fear. Fear of losing her attention. Fear of her approval fading. Fear that maybe you're not enough. And that's the moment you give her control. It's not about love anymore. It's about leverage. Modern dating has become a psychological battlefield, where silence, withdrawal, and emotional uncertainty are weapons. And the more emotionally available you are, the more vulnerable you become to them. She doesn't have to manipulate consciously. Many times, it's instinct. The feminine mind learns early that emotion directs attention, and attention is power. So she doesn't argue with you. She makes you feel uncertain. She doesn't demand effort. She creates scarcity. She doesn't say, chase me. She simply gives you just enough to keep you addicted to the next signal of approval. And what's worse, you think it's love. You think the anxiety you feel is connection. You call it passion. You tell yourself she's just different. But what you're really experiencing is control through contrast. Affection followed by absence, warmth followed by coldness. It's not romance, it's reinforcement. She's training your emotions without even knowing it. But here's the truth the modern man must face. You can't be controlled by what doesn't trigger you. You only lose power when you start needing reaction. And once you learn to master your response, to stay still when your emotions demand action, you stop being manipulated and start becoming unreachable. Because the moment you detach from emotional control, the entire game changes. You stop chasing her energy, and she starts chasing your calm. Before we start, a quick reminder. My complete Stoic couple course is now live at thestoiccouple.podia.com. If you've been learning from these videos, that's just the surface. Inside the course, we go deeper, mastering attraction, understanding female psychology, and rebuilding your mindset from the inside out. Join once, and you're in for life, with lifetime access to all future courses, books, and new lessons. Plus, you'll be part of our private Stoic community, a brotherhood where men like you grow together in discipline, power, and self-control. It's available in English and Spanish, and you can enroll instantly at thestoiccouple.podia.com or click the link below. Enroll once, grow forever. Let's begin. Section 1. The Psychology of Silent Control. How emotional power works without words. Control isn't always loud. In modern dating, it rarely comes from commands or confrontation. It comes from subtle conditioning. A glance, a pause, a sigh. A delayed reply that makes you question your worth. You see, the most effective kind of control doesn't need permission. It only needs reaction. And that's exactly how she gains it. When a woman realizes that your emotional state depends on her response, she doesn't have to say a word to shift your behavior. Her silence becomes a language, her tone becomes strategy, and her distance becomes discipline. She learns that withholding attention gets more of yours. And from that moment on, She doesn't have to ask for power. She simply receives it. Every time she ignores a message, you overthink. Every time she posts something ambiguous, you check twice. Every time she acts cold, you become warm to compensate. That's not coincidence. That's conditioning. It's called emotional reinforcement, a psychological loop where your brain starts associating her approval with reward and her absence with pain. Over time, she becomes the center of your focus, not because she gives you peace, but because she gives you instability. And that instability is addictive. Because deep down, the human mind doesn't crave comfort. It craves resolution. You don't want calmness. You want closure. You want the cycle to end, but it never does. Because the moment you finally pull back, she gives you a little attention again. Just enough to make you believe it's getting better. Just enough to reset your hope. That's the dark rhythm of modern dating. The constant push and pull of emotional control disguised as chemistry. You call it passion. You tell yourself, we just have strong energy together. But what you're really describing is the psychological trap of inconsistent reinforcement. And here's the truth most men can't face. You taught her this. The moment you started reacting to her silence, rewarding her distance, chasing her validation, you handed her the remote control to your emotions. She didn't take your power. You gave it away every time you tried to fix what wasn't broken. But awareness changes everything. Because once you see the pattern, it loses its magic. Once you stop reacting, her silence stops being powerful. It becomes meaningless. That's when the balance starts to shift. Not because you became colder, but because you became clearer. You stopped dancing to emotional tension and started leading through inner calm. And that's how the Stoic man reclaims control. Not by fighting for attention, but by becoming the one thing modern dating can't manipulate, unshakable. Section 2, the reward loop. How she trains your emotions without you realizing it. Every time she pulls away, you feel anxious. Every time she comes back, you feel relief. That's the loop. The emotional roller coaster that quietly trains your nervous system to respond to her rhythm instead of your own. Most men think they're choosing their actions in love. They think, I'm texting her because I care. Or, I'm giving her attention because I want her to feel safe. But in truth, they're reacting to the invisible push and pull of conditioning. It starts small. She takes longer to reply. You send a longer text next time. She seems distant. You start asking if something's wrong. She compliments you. Your entire mood lifts. Without realizing it, your emotions have become dependent on her patterns. She's training your attention through contrast. Affection followed by distance. Validation followed by withdrawal. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When rewards are unpredictable, the brain releases more dopamine, not because of the reward itself, but because of the anticipation of it. That's exactly what she's doing, consciously or not. She gives you just enough emotional reward to keep you engaged, a smile, a compliment, a flirty text. Then disappears long enough for your mind to start craving the next hit. You don't realize it, but you're being rewired to chase her attention, not her affection. And here's the part that hurts. It works because you let it. You trained her too, by showing her that withdrawal gets your reaction, that coldness brings you closer, that silence makes you speak more. It's not manipulation anymore, it's muscle memory. This is why most men lose power in modern dating. They confuse emotional instability with intensity. They mistake anxiety for attraction. They chase peace from the same person who disrupted it. But the Stoic man sees the pattern for what it is, a feedback loop designed to keep him reactive. And once he sees it, he stops feeding it. He stops giving instant replies. He stops explaining his worth. he stops seeking reassurance from a woman who feeds on his attention. Because the moment you withdraw from the loop, the moment you stop reacting, the power dynamic collapses. She loses the control she didn't even know she had. And for the first time, she feels something she hasn't felt in a long time: uncertainty. Now it's her mind that wonders, what's he thinking? It's her emotions that start seeking balance. Because when the reward stops being predictable, the one who used control becomes the one who chases it. And that's how you break the loop, not by fighting her silence, but by mastering your own. Section 3. The Feminine Strategy. How modern women use emotional contrast to control connection. In modern dating, the most powerful form of influence doesn't come from dominance. It comes from contrast. The feminine mind has learned, consciously or not, that the secret to emotional control isn't in what she gives, but in how she alternates it. Warmth, then withdrawal. Attention, then absence. Praise, then indifference. She doesn't need to say, "You mean less to me." She just changes the energy, and your emotions do the rest. Because the human brain is wired to seek balance. When you experience a rush of connection followed by distance, your mind can't let go. It starts searching for answers, replaying moments, questioning your value. And every unanswered question strengthens the emotional bond, not because of love, but because of uncertainty. That's the essence of the modern feminine strategy. Control through emotional contrast. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's instinct. The feminine energy tests, withdraws, observes, not out of cruelty, but out of curiosity. She wants to feel your stability when things get unstable. She wants to know that you can stay calm when emotions fluctuate. But the moment you start reacting, explaining, pleading, chasing, she doesn't feel reassured. She feels confirmed. Because your reaction tells her that her silence has power. And that's the silent transfer of control. From that point on, she doesn't have to guide the relationship. Your emotions do. Now she's the mystery. You're the analyst. She sets the pace. You try to keep up. That's how modern dating quietly shifts the masculine role, from leader to responder. The man becomes the one waiting, interpreting, adjusting. Not because he's weak, but because he was never taught that peace is power. The Stoic man understands this dance. He sees contrast not as connection, but as calibration. When she pulls back, he doesn't panic. He observes. He knows that feminine energy flows in waves, and that real attraction isn't built by chasing those waves, but by standing still while they crash. Because the moment you stay unmoved, when you no longer feed the cycle of reaction, her emotional contrast loses its power. She stops seeing you as someone to test and starts seeing you as someone to trust. And that's the turning point. Because the same woman who once used silence to control you will now use silence to seek you. She'll realize that what she can't shake isn't the game. It's your calm. Section 4. How to neutralize emotional control and regain power. When a woman uses emotion to lead, she's testing something primal, your center. She doesn't consciously want to dominate you. She wants to feel your stability. Because deep down, feminine energy seeks structure. And structure can only exist when you don't lose yourself in her storm. That's where the Stoic man separates himself from the rest. While others chase approval, the Stoic man chases clarity. He doesn't fight emotion with emotion. He meets chaos with calm. He knows that silence isn't weakness. It's a mirror. When she pulls back, he doesn't follow. When she gets cold, he doesn't beg for warmth. When she withdraws her attention, he doesn't panic. He observes. Why? Because he understands the first rule of emotional power. The person who needs less leads more. Control only exists where reaction lives. So when you remove reaction, you remove control. That's why the Stoic response is not about indifference, it's about discipline. It's the art of holding your emotional ground without turning into stone. You still care, but you no longer cling. You still feel, but you don't fall. She can test you, withdraw from you, or even provoke you, but none of it shakes your foundation. And when she realizes that her silence no longer dictates your energy, something shifts. Her power dissolves. Your presence expands. Because calm energy does something that no argument ever can. It forces reflection. When you stop reacting, she has no chaos to feed on, no emotional echo to bounce off. Suddenly, her mind is quiet. And in that silence, she begins to feel something she didn't before. Respect. You see, most men are slaves to reassurance. They measure their worth by a woman's emotional temperature. But the Stoic man flips that script. He becomes the emotional thermostat. He doesn't adjust to her mood, she adjusts to his. And that shift changes everything. Because control doesn't belong to the one who speaks louder. It belongs to the one who speaks last. When your energy becomes predictable, steady, unmoved, she starts to find comfort in your consistency. And what once was control through silence becomes connection through peace. That's when the game ends, because you're no longer a player. You're the ground she stands on. And that's how the Stoic man reclaims power, not by overpowering her, but by mastering himself. Section 5. Breaking the cycle. Turning manipulation into mutual respect. Once you stop reacting, the game starts to crumble. The emotional back and forth that used to drain you begins to lose its power. She can't control what doesn't move. And that's when her respect starts to return. Because the truth is this: women don't want to control men. They test them to find out who they can trust. They pull away to see if you'll chase or collapse. They create emotional friction not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, to feel the strength of your center. And the moment you stop feeding that test with insecurity, you stop being part of her chaos and start becoming her calm. The Stoic man doesn't fight for control. He dissolves it. He knows that dominance is not about force. It's about consistency. He doesn't need to raise his voice, prove his worth, or convince her of anything. His silence speaks for him. His composure becomes the proof. When you stay grounded through her emotional cycles, she starts seeing you differently. The man she once tested now becomes the man she trusts. Because in a world full of men who fold under pressure, your stillness feels like safety. And that's when something powerful happens. She lets go of the game. Not because you forced her to, but because she no longer needs to play it. You taught her something without words, that peace isn't boring, it's magnetic. That a man who doesn't chase her mood becomes the one she wants to align with. Because stability is the highest form of attraction. This is how manipulation transforms into respect. Not through confrontation, but through contrast. She sees that, while others mirror her chaos, you embody order. While others react to her emotions, you regulate your own. While others demand love, you radiate it without dependence. And that contrast doesn't just attract her, it inspires her. Because deep down, the feminine doesn't want to lead emotionally. She wants to feel safe enough to surrender. So when you hold your peace through silence, distance, or emotional tension, you teach her through energy, not argument, that your love is not fragile, that you can care deeply without losing yourself. And from that moment on, control disappears. Because control can't exist where there's respect. You stopped being her reaction. You became her reminder. That's the power of the Stoic man. He doesn't break her down to prove dominance. He holds his peace long enough for her to rise to it. And that's the kind of leadership no manipulation can survive. Section 6. The power of detachment. How to stay unreachable without becoming cold. Detachment isn't about indifference, it's about balance. The world has twisted that word, made it sound heartless, disconnected, robotic. But real detachment isn't about pushing people away. It's about never losing yourself when they leave. When a man learns to detach, he doesn't stop feeling. He just stops depending. He still loves deeply, but without needing validation. He still cares, but he doesn't cling. He still gives, but without expecting a return. That's the Stoic secret most men never master. The ability to love without surrendering your peace. Because once you become emotionally dependent, you lose your power. You start reacting instead of leading. You start seeking instead of creating. And slowly, you stop being yourself, just a reflection of her moods, her attention, her silence. But when you detach, everything changes. You begin to see her behavior as information, not judgment. You interpret her silence as space, not rejection. You recognize that her emotions belong to her, not as something to fix, but as something to understand. And that's when the magic happens. You become unreachable. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built depth. She can no longer shake your calm with uncertainty. She can't manipulate your focus with distance. She can't own your mind because your mind no longer seeks her reaction to survive. That's when a man becomes truly attractive, when he radiates self-sufficiency, peace, and purpose. Because while everyone else is chasing attention, he's chasing alignment. He's not seeking love to fill a void. He's creating it from within. This is the paradox of attraction that few understand. When you no longer need someone to choose you, they begin to want you more. When you no longer try to convince, your presence does the talking. When you stop reaching out of fear, your silence becomes power. That's why detachment isn't a tactic. It's a transformation. It's what separates the emotionally fragile from the emotionally free. And the beautiful truth? You don't have to harden your heart to become unshakable. You just have to stop letting temporary emotions dictate permanent reactions. Because the man who detaches doesn't walk away from love. He walks away from illusion. He doesn't abandon connection. He just refuses to lose himself inside it. That's the man she remembers. That's the energy she can't replace. And that's the version of you the world will follow. Calm, present, and unreachable. Section 7. Silence as dominance. Why the Stoic man always wins in the end. At the end of every storm, there's silence. But in that silence, power lives. You see, most men speak to prove themselves. They explain, they justify, they plead to be understood. But the Stoic man? He doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks only when his words have weight. That's why silence has always been his weapon. Because in a world of noise, silence is control. In a world of reaction, silence is dominance. When you stop explaining yourself, people start wondering what you're thinking. When you stop chasing attention, people start competing for your focus. And when you stop trying to be understood, that's when your presence finally is. That's what most men never realize about the power of silence. It's not passive. It's not weak. It's psychological control at the highest level. Because silence does something that words never can. It forces reflection. When she talks and you don't respond, she starts hearing her own thoughts louder. When she expects a reaction and you remain calm, she starts questioning her own behavior. That's when dominance shifts, not through confrontation, but through composure. You don't win arguments by being louder. You win by being clearer. And nothing is clearer than the silence of a man who knows his worth. That's why she can't forget you, because silence lingers. Words fade, but silence echoes. And the calm of a man who walks away without anger burns deeper than any speech could. She'll think about it later. Why didn't he react? Why didn't he fight back? Why did his silence feel heavier than my words? That's when the mind turns against itself. Because deep down, she knows. The moment you stopped reacting, she stopped controlling. And that's the moment she lost you. But here's the beauty. Silence isn't revenge. It's revelation. It shows you who's meant for you and who only came to test you. It reveals whether she's drawn to your peace or just addicted to your attention. And in that truth lies your freedom. Because the Stoic man doesn't use silence to punish, he uses it to purify. He doesn't retreat to manipulate, he retreats to reset. And when he returns, it's never to chase, it's to choose. That's why the Stoic man always wins in the end. Not because he conquered anyone, but because he conquered himself. His silence is not emptiness, it's mastery. It's the sound of power, control, and emotional evolution. So remember this: the man who controls his silence controls everything. Silence. That's how strength sounds when the storm ends. Not a victory speech, not a shouted, "I told you so." Just calm, pure, unshakable calm. Because at this point, you've seen what most men never will. You've learned that control isn't about what you hold on to. It's about what you can let go of. You've felt how silence cuts deeper than any reaction, how peace intimidates the unstable, and how discipline makes you magnetic. You didn't just survive her distance, you mastered yourself through it. That's the entire mission of the Stoic couple: to turn heartbreak into clarity, to turn chaos into focus, to turn men into leaders, not through noise, but through stillness. But if you think this video is where it ends, you're only seeing the surface. Inside our full course, the Stoic Relationship Blueprint, we go far deeper. You'll learn how to control the emotional rhythm of attraction, how to reclaim respect without chasing, and how to understand female psychology through the lens of Stoic mastery. This isn't a series of tricks or phrases. It's a full transformation, a step-by-step guide to becoming the man who commands peace in every situation. And the best part? You only need to join once, because once you enroll, you'll have lifetime access to every lesson, every update, every new series or book that's released inside our platform. This isn't a subscription. It's a brotherhood. When you join, you also gain entry to our private Stoic community inside Podia, a place where real men talk, share, and grow together. No fake confidence, no noise. Just clarity, accountability, and evolution. It doesn't matter where you're starting, broken, confused, or rebuilding. What matters is that you start now, because the man who hesitates waits for peace, but the man who acts creates it. So if you're ready to stop chasing attention and start building attraction through discipline, purpose, and silence, this is your moment. Visit thestoiccouple.podia.com or click the link in the description. Enroll once, grow forever. Because when you master your silence, you master the game. And when you master yourself, you never lose. Where silence becomes strength and peace becomes power.